Hello Thrivers, welcome back. For those that are new, my name is Michele and I'm the owner and founder of the Thriver School of Transformation, which is an online membership where we meet together weekly and we don't just learn about complex PTSD, but together we work through the side effects, with the goal being that life should be lived as who you are, not who the trauma turned you into. So if you're interested in that, make sure you check out the links in the description box below. And what I was doing today was I was actually answering a question that somebody sent in. Recently, somebody sent in the question asking, why is it that when somebody is battling complex PTSD, why is it that they feel like they are stuck in the past, no matter how many years go by? This is such an important question because I actually get clients that have been out of relationships for years. Some of them it was intimate relationships, some of them it was relationships with family members, and others it was work relationships, right? And a lot of them have been out for a long time, some even more than a decade, and yet it's almost like the past life or the trauma that they lived while in those relationships is still affecting them. And there is nothing worse. There's nothing worse than having lost so many years dealing with trauma, right? Years that you can't get back. And now to be out of or away from any toxic people and still feel like that trauma is stealing your life, there's nothing worse than that. So hopefully this video will help you to understand why that can be so challenging, because trust me, it's something that so many, in fact, most people battle as they're on their healing journey. So what I did was I listed about 6 reasons as to why this happens. And for the sake of time and for the sake of this video, I'm just going to talk briefly about those 6 different things, and it's not in any particular order of importance. But what I'm going to do after is I'm going to break those 6 different aspects of the healing journey into separate videos. So let's just jump in and start understanding it, because the reality is that if somebody was in a relationship that wasn't good for them, right? But there was no emotional manipulation or psychological abuse, while there's a healing period, and there's even like a mourning period, right? Mourning the relationship that you thought you were going to have and didn't wind up having. The reality is that if somebody's been through trauma, or if somebody's been in relationships with people that psychologically abuse, the recovery period it lasts a lot longer. And some people never get out of that stage, okay? And these are some of the reasons. So the first reason is because if you were in a relationship with somebody that might be high on the scale of covert narcissism or malignant narcissism, then you probably lived a large part of that time in a state of what's known as cognitive dissonance. So with cognitive dissonance, it's like your mind is stuck between 2 thoughts: the truth and what you think is truth. And they don't often coincide. So just to give a quick example, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody that's abusive, right? But the 2 thoughts that you wind up getting stuck in between are, he loves me, but he treats me horribly. So those 2 thoughts, they don't connect. It's like 2 puzzle pieces that just don't fit together. And when that happens, the mind gets stuck trying to make sense of these 2 opposing thoughts. And your brain could be like a ping pong game going on up there, where it's going back and forth and not going anywhere forward. Okay? Cognitive dissonance is something that happens when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, because nothing they do makes sense. Their treatment doesn't make sense. Their words and their actions are never on the same page. And so your brain is trying to wrap itself around logic when logic doesn't exist, right? So a person lives in a state of cognitive dissonance when they're in the relationship, and that can extend after the person isn't around anymore. Your brain still gets used to that way of thinking. It still has never learned how to work through that cognitive dissonance, so it can still stay stuck in things like, I know this person was abusive, but nobody believes me. Everyone denies that or invalidates that. So now it's stuck between these two thoughts. He's abusive, people say he's not, or she gets stuck in this obsessive need to find answers. And that's why a lot of people wind up getting addicted to videos about narcissists. And it's like, in the beginning, it's necessary. I completely feel like if you don't watch those videos, if you don't understand about narcissistic personality, if you've been in a relationship with somebody, you can't get out of the web. So it's a necessary part on the healing journey. But if people don't learn how to work through the dissonance and how to move forward, you can get stuck in that state of seeking answers, seeking validation. And that's why I feel like people get stuck watching videos. They're learning about the narcissist, they're learning about the other person, trying to get those answers, trying to make sense of the opposing thoughts that are kind of pinging off of each other in their mind. The second thing that can keep a person stuck, feeling like they're still in the past, are emotional flashbacks. So an emotional flashback, right, there's no visual component to an emotional flashback. Most of the time you don't even realize you're having one until you start learning and looking for them, right? So when you're having an emotional flashback, you're responding and reacting to a higher degree than what is called for at the moment. And it's usually because of a trigger, right? So not to get into that, all of what an emotional flashback is for the sake of time, but just to help you to understand why that keeps you stuck in the past. So when you have an emotional flashback, not only does the left side of your brain kind of check out, right? Short circuit. You think of maybe your home and one room loses power. The lights are on everywhere else, but they're not on in that room. Well, with our brain, when there is an emotional flashback, the lights are out on the left side or the logical parts of your brain. And what happens as a result of that is that your brain can actually confuse past and present. That trigger on a subconscious level may remind your brain of something in the past. You may not even realize it in the beginning, right? But it reminds your brain of something in the past, and you react from the past emotional state that you were in. You're not handling it from the present state that's going on at the moment, but it's actually confusing past and present, and you're showing up with that same energy and that same intensity of emotion that you had in the past. Okay, now just a quick story regarding emotional flashbacks and how they affect you. So a lot of you know that I was living in Mexico for a few years, okay? And I've been healing, right? Healing is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. So I was doing great. My triggers, as far as triggers, they were like, really down. It was an amazing difference from obviously years back when I first started this channel. And I had to come back to New York. Well, a lot of things happened in New York. And I didn't realize what it would do to me as far as on my healing journey. So when I came back and I was around certain situations, certain people that on a conscious level, they didn't remind me of anything of the past, but on a subconscious level, they did, because they were people that were around at a very difficult time in my life. Okay, so all of a sudden, all the triggers I thought I had healed were back. And a lot of the challenges, a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the fears, a lot of the emotional states, ways of thinking that I thought I had healed came back. And it's not that I hadn't healed, okay, because I had healed a lot. However, a lot of that was the benefit of not being around things or people that reminded me of any of my past trauma. So in a way, I wasn't around people that were triggering me or situations that were triggering me, so I wasn't feeling those triggers. This is how crazy trauma is with the brain. Okay, years can go by. You may think you're doing amazing, but suddenly you're around people or places or situations that in some way remind you of the past trauma, and your subconscious mind will bring it up and you will start reacting and feeling the same way you did in the past. So the reason I'm bringing this up is to let you know that emotional triggers, they take a long time to really work through. And I remember one day I was in the kitchen with my husband and I was like, why am I feeling these things? Like, this is from the past. I don't feel this way anymore. Why is this happening? And at that second, I was in the middle of an emotional flashback and I had to realize that I was feeling from the past because what was going on in the present was waking up triggers that I hadn't fully healed. Now, thankfully, I was far enough on my journey that I could view that as an opportunity. That was an opportunity for me to deepen my healing with my triggers. But I just want to let you know that that's what happens with emotional flashbacks. If you don't learn how to work through the triggers, if you don't know how to heal the triggers completely, whether you're around what triggers you or not, eventually you're going to be around something that's going to trigger you and it can throw you back into those feelings of the past. Okay, so if that happens, it's not about leaving and not being around those situations. It's about learning how to strengthen and heal those triggers. The third thing that can keep you stuck in the past is the fact that there's a neurological factor involved when it comes to narcissistic abuse, okay? There are things that are happening when it comes to your brain regulation, and they can keep you addicted. So I'll just explain it quickly and then I'll go into depth in another video. When you were in those toxic relationships, you felt a lot of intense emotions, right? Intense cycles of amazing horror. There was nothing in the middle, right? Well, your brain gets a tremendous amount of dopamine when it goes from horror to amazing. And so when it goes back down, your body almost craves that. It craves that feeling again. It craves feeling those emotions, intense emotions again, so that it can get that hit of dopamine. So sometimes you can be out of that relationship, and the way people wind up staying in that cycle, this is the crazy part, but the way they can stay in that cycle of those intense emotions and your brain getting dopamine by a not the healthiest way, is watching videos that remind them of the narcissist. Again, I'm not talking about in the beginning when you're learning and you're just getting your eyes open, right, to exactly what's going on, and that beginning validation that you need in order to move forward and heal. I'm talking about somebody that has been years now watching videos on the narcissist, okay? Years. And they're still watching videos on the narcissist. Well, what's happening is every time they get on a video that is able to bring up those intense emotions, the body, or the brain, I should say, gives you a hit of dopamine because it's feeling those feelings again. So it feels good for a second, that validation that, yes, that video described it exactly, yes, that feeling of, that good feeling of validation that you feel keeps you addicted. So what happens is, okay, the next day you're looking and you're hopping from video to video. Yeah, that video, a little bit. Yeah, that video talks a little bit about it. Yeah, I get that. But then you find the video that is able to pull up those emotions again. And it gives you that rush. And you're, without realizing it, your brain is pushing you. Okay, maybe it's not pushing you to be with a narcissist, which is great. But it's still pushing you to get dopamine from ways that keep you stuck in the past. Number 4 is the fact that you've been abused, right? You've been through something traumatic, and yet this could be that nobody in your family supports that. And there's like this muddy reality, right? Your reality is what happened. You finally, after years of being in darkness, after years of being confused and lied to and believing their reality, you finally get a hold of your own, but nobody supports it. So part of narcissistic abuse, you have to remember that a narcissist doesn't see someone else's perspective, right? You always have to have the same perspective as the narcissist. You're never allowed to have your own perspective. So that way of feeling like you're not allowed to hold on to your perspective unless somebody else agrees with you can stay with you even after the relationship has ended. And the reason for that is because that has become a belief in your subconscious mind. I need them to see truth. I need somebody else to believe me in order for me to believe myself. And so not feeling believed can sometimes keep a person stuck because it creates anger, it creates resentment. Those are two emotions that can keep you stuck in the past. Number 5 is the fact that narcissistic abuse affects the limbic system of your brain. That's your alarm system. And it creates what's known as limbic system loops. They could be thought patterns that just happen automatically. So because of the abuse, those specific thought patterns that keep you focused on the past, that keep you feeling the anger, that keep you focused on the other person, they're so ingrained that you get stuck in a limbic system loop that feels like you can't break out of. And I heard somebody refer to, not necessarily the limbic system loop, but they were talking about our neural pathways. Okay, so you think of our neural pathways as the roads in our mind. And imagine if you've ever driven either in the snow or in the mud. And if somebody's driven down a road that hasn't been plowed, right? You have the tracks of where the car wheels can go. Same thing with the mud. And if a car has traveled down them that for a long time, you don't even have to put your hand on the wheel. Your car is going to stay exactly where it's been carved out. Well, that's what happens with limbic system loops. We get into this negative thinking or this negative focus, this focus on the past. And it's like those driving in mud or snow, where the pathway to those thoughts is so ingrained that we have a hard time breaking out of those limbic system loops. And the last reason that I'm going to mention for this video has to do with another system of your brain, and that's your prefrontal cortex, or the reward center of your brain, I should say. In order to not stay focused on the past, we have to be able to look towards our future. In order to look at the future, we have to have clear thinking ability to be able to do that. We have to have critical thinking, right? We have to be able to set goals and feel motivated to do them. And unfortunately, when you've been through narcissistic abuse or you're battling complex PTSD, this part of your brain has not been utilized the way it's supposed to. Chronic stress and emotional trauma keep you stuck in different parts of your brain, like your amygdala, right? Or your limbic system, which is your alarm center, your fear centers. And when we're in those parts of our brain for prolonged periods of time, we're not in where we're supposed to be, which is our prefrontal cortex. That's where we have our executive functioning, right? So since that area of the brain grows weak, think of it like a muscle. When you stop exercising certain muscles and you're only exercising others, well, the muscles you're exercising get strong and the ones you're not get weak. The areas of your brain that you're living in chronically, like your fight or flight, your amygdala, your limbic network, they get strong, and what you're not utilizing gets weak. So it's very hard to put your present life together to work towards your future if that part of your brain has been weakened as a result of the chronic abuse or the chronic stress. Okay, so that's a lot of deep stuff. I mean, when you look at those 6 things, and I'm sure those are not the only reasons why a person can feel stuck in the past, right? But those are some big things. Those aren't things that you heal overnight. Those aren't things that you watch a video and you're like, changed person the next day. It takes time, and you have to do the work. That's the part that takes time. You actually have to take what you're learning and learn how to put it into practice in a way that helps you to take your focus from the past, to learn how to be in the present, and learn how to create the future that you want. But remember, if you are hopping from video to video and you are not changing the way you want to change, you might need a little bit more help. And the Thriver School of Transformation was designed for that purpose, to be an affordable resource that can help people on a weekly basis to work towards putting all of this into practice in a practical way in your daily life. So make sure you check it out. For the month of March, there is a 15% coupon. The coupon code will be in the description box below.